Hello everyone, Namaskar. So there's been a lot of silence on the channel for the last couple of days for the very simple reason that me, Advocate Shashank, Krishna, Rohan, a lot of our faculty members were simply working on trying to have a very detailed solution for Prelims 2023, which we were very confident about, and it took us 4 days for the very simple reason कि हम झगड़ रहे थे कॉन्स्टेंटली. वी वर नॉट रियली श्योर अबाउट कि अच्छा ये आंसर ये होना चाहिए या नहीं होना चाहिए. एंड वी कम आउट विद डिटेल्ड की ऑन आर वेबसाइट. यू कैन चेक इट आउट. वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन में लिंक भी आपको मिल जाएगा. एंड आई विल ऑल्सो बी कमिंग आउट विद द लॉन्गर वीडियो बाय टुमारो वेयर आई विल बी डिस्कसिंग कि भाई क्यों मुझे लगता है ये पेपर हार्ड था एंड क्या गलतियाँ हो सकती हैं, क्या चीज़ें सुधरनी चाहिए, क्या चीज़ें अनफेयर हैं पेटेंटली. एंड with that in mind, today's video is going to be about the CSAT Comprehension के solutions. Now, comprehension के solutions only will be discussed in today's video, not the math parts. Why? Because we feel कि most of the institutes will get the math का parts right? Because they're a little more objective. But जहाँ पे अंग्रेजी की बात आती है तो then a lot of institutes falter, उनकी keys में mistakes होती हैं for the very simple reason that at least I feel कि बहुत लोगों को अंग्रेज़ी समझ नहीं आती है. एंड इसका एक बहुत सिंपल सा उदाहरण जो मेरी पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस से रहा है वो ये रहा है कि भाई इन 2020 व्हेन आई वाज गिविंग प्रीलिम्स तो आई हैड अटेम्प्टेड 63 क्वेश्चंस. अबाउट 120 मेरे आंसर की से बन रहे थे, बट इवेंचुअली मेरे आए जो हैं दैट इज़ 142. तो गेटिंग 142 इन सी सैट मीन्स अबाउट 8 to 10 क्वेश्चंस डिफर्ड. एंड माई अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज़ कि मैथ में तो नहीं होगा इतना झोल, most likely reading comprehension में होगा. And for that reason today's video will be a discussion of the reading comprehension का solutions. Now we will talk you through कि भाई हमारा logic क्या है, क्यों है, and these are all solutions that I've sat with Shagun and discussed them in detail so that we bring out the most authentic answer key in this regard. But again in the end UPSC अगले साल बताएगा तुम्हें कि भाई हम सही थे नहीं थे, तुम सही थे नहीं थे, whatever. In the end UPSC is the one deciding it, even if it is just weird to have this at times. Still, today's video will be Shagun discussing her impression of CSAT because she also gave CSAT, prelims on the Sunday, and she will also be sharing detailed solutions for comprehension questions. The answer key, if you want CSAT ka full, is also available in the video ka description. I do hope that if you've been preparing and you were disheartened, border पे हो, कोई problem, अब like कोई problem बोलना तो यहाँ पे ठीक सा भी नहीं लग रहा है बिकॉज दिस इज जस्ट व्हाट काइंड ऑफ अ पेपर वाज दिस. बट एनी हाउ डिस्कस करना बनता है, डिस्कस करते हैं. एंड टुमारो प्लीज़ डू चेक आउट द लार्जर वीडियो वेयर आई बी टॉकिंग अबाउट कट ऑफ का प्रेडिक्शंस, वेयर आई बी टॉकिंग अबाउट कि भाई व्हाट इज़ माई ओवरऑल इंप्रेशन ऑफ द एग्जाम, कितने हार्ड क्वेश्चंस थे, कितने ईजी क्वेश्चंस थे, एंड व्हाट शुड बी योर नेक्स्ट स्टेप्स. सो बेस्ट ऑफ लक एंड लेट्स कंटिन्यू विद द सॉल्यूशंस.
Hello everyone, welcome to UPSCprep.com. I'm Shagun Singh, and as you must have guessed from the title before, that this video is going to be about a comprehensive analysis on the comprehension aspect of the CSAT paper of this Saturday. So what can you expect here is we're going to try and break down the passages very logically with the same methodology that I have taught in the previous class of mine, and we are going to see step by step what would be the most appropriate answer according to me. Right? That's what you can expect from this video. Secondly, there is one or two realities that I would like to definitely address before I start with the aspect that you came here and why you're here for the video, which is obviously to see if the logics match, is the fact that A, इस बार का जो comprehension का section था, that was doable, right? It was not something that could not have been solved if you didn't have the correct tools for it. If you knew what you had to do in each question, you would have been able to solve it. That's the reality. It was not as ambiguous as the last time. I think 2022 का paper ज़्यादा ambiguous था. इस बार answers फिर भी ज़्यादा straightforward थे. Secondly, having said that, of course, there is a reality with the comprehension questions. There is also a reality that in the CSAT paper, math was extremely tough. There is a reality that's not going away anywhere. GS was ambiguous, more tough तो एक बात है, ambiguity बहुत थी. तो आप एक pressurized mindset से question solve कर रहे होगे. इसलिए what I want you to do while you're seeing this video is to know one thing, that, of course, this video is there to see and match your accuracy to be able to predict if you're clearing this round or not. But secondly, you have to understand that as an aspirant, you just went through extremely extraordinary circumstances, which is something that you may not have prepared for in your life. You may not have ever thought that the paper was going to go this flipped. शायद आपने एंटिसिपेट नहीं किया होगा ये इसका बर्डन आपके दिमाग में था जब आप कॉम्प्रिहेंशन के क्वेश्चन सॉल्व कर रहे थे इसीलिए not being able to solve the comprehension questions is not a commentary on your abilities because I'm sure you would have been able to apply the same logic. It's just that the added pressure of the 2 hours before and the math section that existed may have created certain problems with the way that you approach the question. So I want you to take this video as an understanding that it is not about your ability. It is not about anything else. It is just about the fact that you went through really, really harrowing circumstances, really tough circumstances, and yet you're here. Yet you're seeing these videos, yet you solved those papers, yet you gave your best. You really did. And that's commendable. Another thing, this skill of being able to handle such difficult circumstances is something that you will take with the rest of your life. So I hope if this paper gives you nothing, it at least gives you this understanding and faith in your resilience. So just this 2 cents that I wanted to definitely put out there, considering how the paper has been going. And without wasting any further time, let me just straight get into the solving aspect. All right. So moving ahead, we'll go with the first question. Like I've discussed before, what needs to be done first is to check what is the demand of the question. Our demand ये है कि the author is asking the most rational, practical and immediate action. अब जब rational, practical और immediate action की बात हो रही है, तो यहाँ पे corollary की बात हो रही है. Corollary is what? It's an immediate consequence, right? An immediate action that can take place. So let's read the passage keeping this in mind. Right? So, we often hear about conflicts among different states in India over river waters. Also, 20 major river systems, 14 are already water stressed. 75% of the population lives in water stressed regions. A third of whom live in the water scarce areas. Okay, so यहाँ पे क्या हुआ है? यहाँ पे हम river conflicts की बात कर रहे हैं, states की बात कर रहे हैं, और यहाँ पे pure data है. और जब जहां पे भी प्योर डेटा होता है वो बेसिकली सब्सटैंशियल पॉइंट होता है दैट्स बेसिकली अ पॉइंट जस्ट टू सब्सटैंशिएट योर आर्गुमेंट सो ऑथर्स जस्ट गिवन दैट नाउ लेट्स मूव अहेड climate change the demands of rising population and needs for agriculture to keep pace and increased rate of urbanization and industrialization will exacerbate water stress. What is he saying now? He's saying that climate change, population, agriculture, these things will obviously put more stress on the water. है ना? And according to Constitution of India, water is a state subject and not that of the Union except for regulation of interstate rivers. Again, he's not making any substantial point here. He's just substantiating his argument. Argument ab aa raha hai after this. Key to ensuring balance between competing demands of various stakeholders is a basin-based approach to allocate water amongst constituent regions and states. Allocating fair share of water to them requires assessments based on objective criteria, such as specifications of the river basin, size of dependent population, existing water use and demand, efficiency of use, projected future use, etc., while ensuring the environmental needs of the rivers and aquifers. Alright. So यहाँ पे क्या हुआ है? यहाँ पे basically author क्या बोल रहा है कि there is a key to ensuring balance between competing demands, and that key can be found out by genuinely understanding what are the water requirements, who requires more water. We understand this by understanding kitni population hai, what is this population using this water for. So really pragmatic, really predictable, really understandable ideas, right? Doable ideas. So इसमें आपको ये समझ आना चाहिए कि in the first passage, all the author did in the first part was give hard-hitting facts just to substantiate his argument that whenever we are trying to ensure that there is a balance between competing interests, That's when we have to take a very practical approach, a very understandable approach. Cool. Now, let's look at the options. A national pragmatic legal and policy framework for water allocation should be made. Could be the answer, because you're talking about what? We're talking about really looking at options that basically look at facts, that look at the legalities of things, that look at how does water sharing actually happen. So A, as an immediate action, makes sense. है ना? अब B देखते हैं. Sorry about this. Let's look at B. All river systems in the country should be linked and huge aquifers created. Now, again, here this is just one part of the argument. If you remember my video from before, I had mentioned very clearly that if the passage is talking about, let's say, fruits, but the option only mentions about bananas or let's say mangoes, then that can't be your answer, right? तो ये narrow argument है. तो narrow argument को आप हटा सकते हो. तो आपको पता है कि भी ऑप्शन नहीं रहा. अब C और D देख लेते हैं. Water channels between regions of water surplus and regions of water deficit should be created. Again, narrow, so won't be the answer. Similarly, D, to mitigate water crisis, water demand of sectors such as agriculture and industry should be reduced. Again, एक पार्ट है, पूरा आर्ग्यूमेंट नहीं है, तो उस हिसाब से ये भी हट सकता है. तो आपका आंसर क्या रह गया? आपका आंसर ए रह गया. अब हम आगे बढ़ते हैं. What is the passage asking? The passage is asking best reflects what is implied by the passage. Now, if you're talking about an implication, basically what are we looking for? We're looking for hints, right? We're looking for hints in the argument. Now let's read this out loud. More than half of Indian women and almost a quarter of Indian men of working age suffer from anemia. He's mentioned that there is a problem with Indian women and men, which is of anemia. हमें ये पता चल लग गया, तो हमें ये पता है कि health के बारे में कुछ ना कुछ दिया गया होगा. According to studies, they are anywhere from 5 to 15% less productive than they could be as a result thereof. So what did he say next? Anemic people are 5 to 15% less productive. That's all that he's trying to say. अब आगे बढ़ते हैं. India also has the largest tuberculosis burden in the world, costing 170 million workdays to the country annually. Again, he's substantiating his argument here. He's saying that there is a connection between health and there is a connection between work and economy. Right? Now, but what is just as important as lost productivity now is the lost potential in the future. It is becoming increasingly clear that on many measures of cognitive ability, malnourished Indian children perform 2 or 3 times worse than their adequately nourished peers. For an economy that will be more dependent on highly skilled workers, this poses a significant challenge. And it is one that really should be addressed given India's demographic outlook. Simple. So basically, क्या बात हो रही है यहाँ पे? यहाँ पे बात हो रही है कि health is really intertwined with the aspect of economy, because if you're sick, obviously you'll be less productive. So he's saying we need to address the fact that malnourished children, they will not create or they will not be good workers in the future, because if you're malnourished, if you're stunted, if your ability to think is only impacted, how are you going to contribute to the environment and contribute to the economy? So that's the entire idea of the passage, and we have to look for hints. These are the hints that basically the author has been given. कि health is wealth, ये देखो health नहीं होगा तो wealth नहीं होगा, और हमें इंडिया के डेमोग्राफिक आउटलुक के हिसाब से we have to plan things in a way that looks at the nutritious requirements of the children that are presently being reared. Cool. So given these hints, let's look at the options. Indian education system must be strengthened in rural areas. Rural areas की बात हुई है? नहीं बात हुई है. Irrelevant है, हटाओ. Large scale and effective implementation of skill development program. Are we talking about skill development here, or are we talking about connection between health as well as the connection between work and productivity? So B आपका हट जाता है. For economic development, health and nutrition of only skilled workers. Have we talked about something like this? Of only skilled workers? We're talking about creation of skilled workers, right? So C with that logic gets removed. बच गया डी. आपको पता है डी आपका आंसर है, पर फिर भी हम देख लेते हैं. For rapid economic growth as envisaged by us, attention should be paid to health and nutrition of the people. Yes, captures the whole argument, talks about health is absolutely the idea or the foundation of a well-functioning economy. So D becomes your answer. Now, let's move to the next question. Here we're talking about the most logical and rational message conveyed by the author of the passage. Okay. So, keeping this in mind, we'll read it out loud. In India, a majority of farmers are marginal and small, less educated and possess low adaptive capabilities to climate change. Okay. First passage, what do we understand? हमें पता है कि यहाँ पे farmers की बात हो रही है. A. हमें पता है कि less educated होते हैं farmers. They possess low adaptive capabilities for climate change because of this and because of the fact that perhaps because of credit and other constraints. So we know that climate change का adaptation नहीं हो पाता है, capability नहीं हो पाती क्योंकि वो they're poor A and B. They're also not very educated about this. We know this. आगे बढ़ते हैं. So one cannot expect autonomous adaptation to climate change. अब हम ये expect नहीं कर सकते हैं कि farmers कल जाके खुद से ही climate change के risks को mitigate करेंगे, right? They can't be the ones taking up climate change measures which are good for the farmers. So we can't expect that to happen. This is the context that has been set by the author. Now let's look at the next paragraphs. Even if it was possible, it would not be sufficient to offset losses from climate change. To deal with this, adaptation to climate change is paramount alongside a fast mitigation response. Another solution to have a plan of policy-driven adaptation, which would require the government to come up with policy recommendations. Perception is a necessary prerequisite for adaptation. Whether farmers are adapting agriculture practices to climate change depends on whether they perceive it or not. However, this is not always enough for adaptation. It is important how a farmer perceives the risk associated with climate change. Okay. So, दूसरे पैराग्राफ में क्या बोला ऑथर ने बोला कि गवर्नमेंट को ऐसे पॉलिसीज बनानी चाहिए which creates a perception that for farmers also adaptation is a prerequisite. मतलब अगर वो climate change के against steps नहीं लेंगे उनकी ही फसल पे दिक्कत आएगी, right? It is important for them to perceive climate change as a risk, for them to even do something about it. And this perception creation is the job of policy, is the job of policy-driven adaptation. So that's the idea of the entire passage here. Now let's look at the options. A. Adaptation to climate change and mitigation response are basically the responsibilities of the government. Now, we're not talking about adaptation to climate change and mitigation response only, right? We're not talking about simply this. We're talking about how the responsibility of the government is also to create a perception, right? So that idea is completely missing from this option. So it can't be the most rational message, right? Because it's missing ideas that the author is definitely putting forward. So A gets eliminated. Let's look at option number B. Climate change causes a change in government policies regarding land use patterns. Are we talking about land use patterns anywhere? No. So B gets removed. Risk perception of farmers are important for motivating them for taking adaptation decisions. Definitely. Definitely this is being talked about. So C could be the answer. एक बार D देख लेते हैं. So mitigation is not possible. Again, आपको पहली लाइन से ही पता लग गया कि आंसर नहीं है. क्यों लिखा? कि मिटिगेशन इज नॉट पॉसिबल लिखा है, ऐसा थोड़ा ना लिखा है यार. पूरे के पूरे उसमें खाली ये लिखा है कि मिटिगेशन पॉसिबल है, बट परसेप्शन क्रिएशन भी पॉसिबल भी करना जरूरी है. सो डी डेफिनेटली इज नॉट योर आंसर. देन यू गेट सी. सी, these are the questions because of which I say that the paper was comparatively less ambiguous as compared to last year. Of course, there are questions which are ambiguous, and we will talk about that too. But this is one of the reasons why. Now, let's move forward. All right. छोटा सा passage है, आराम से पढ़ेंगे, पर पहले demand पढ़ लेते हैं. Which of the following statements best reflect the crucial message conveyed by the author of the passage? All right. Message पूछ रहा है. Message पूछ रहा है तो हमें क्या करना है? Basically ये देखना है कि key ideas क्या थे. right? ढंग से एक बार पढ़ लेते हैं. The emissions human put into the atmosphere now will affect the climate in the middle of the century and onwards. Technological change, meanwhile, could make a future transition away from fossil fuels cheap, or it might not, leaving the world with a terrible choice between sharply reducing emissions at a huge cost or suffering through the effects of unabated warming. Businesses that do not hedge against the threat of uncertain outcomes fail. The world cannot afford such recklessness on climate change. Okay. तो इसमें हमें क्या समझ आया? इसमें हमें यहाँ ये समझ आया कि यहाँ से लेके यहाँ तक, right, till here, the author is just substantiating his argument. Why? He's just giving examples. क्या क्या हो सकता है? बस पते की बात कहाँ पे हुई है? The thing that we should know is the world cannot afford such recklessness on climate change. We know this is the main part of his argument, that we cannot be reckless. We cannot be not preparing for the risks that come along with climate change, be it for businesses, be it for technological change, be it for anything. Cool. That's the key idea. Now let's look at the options. Businesses that cause emissions may need to close down or pay for pollution in the future. कहीं पे भी लिखा है ये idea? नहीं लिखा है. तो हटाओ. Move it. B देखते हैं. The only solution is technological development related to the issues of climate change. The only solution. Are we talking about the solution first of all at all? No. He's talking about be wary. वो solutions नहीं दे रहा है. He's giving an idea for you to be wary of the fact that this recklessness can cause a lot of suffering in the future. Solution नहीं दिया है. तो B आपका आंसर नहीं हो सकता. अब C देखते हैं. Waiting to deal with carbon emissions until technology improves is not a wise strategy. Could this be the answer? Definitely. Why? Because this is the only one which has a tone which is warning the reader, A, and B, this is the only one which reflects the idea of the author. अब D भी देख लेते हैं. Since future technological change is uncertain, new industries should be based on renewable energy sources. Again, did we talk about renewable energy resources anywhere? Did we talk about solutions anywhere? No. So D is also not your answer. Automatically, you know, C is your idea. Let's move on to the next question. Another small passage. What are they asking? Most rational assumption. Environmental problems cause health problems. पहली लाइन से आपको समझ आ गया है कि ये passage basically environment और health problems के बारे में. You know this. Substantial changes in lifestyle can reduce environmental or health problems, but the idea appears almost impossible to adopt. So what is happening here? He's saying that certain changes in lifestyle as well as environmental or health problems, if you change your lifestyle, you will be able to solve substantial changes in your health as well as your environment. Life movement is basically about this only. If you guys don't know about this, please Google about this. With environmental problems, individual efforts can be perceived as having a negligible effect and therefore leads to inertia. So what happens is, whenever there are environmental problems, individual efforts can be seen as having no effect at all. आपको लगेगा कि मैं जितना भी मेहनत कर लूं, भाई climate change तो रहना ही रहना है, right? So because of this he is arguing that that's why it's very difficult to change, and thus there is an inertia. With health, he is saying that, on the other hand, individual choices can make difference between life and death literally, and yet, barring a few, there seems to be the same collective lethargy towards making the right choices. Alright, so here what's happening is that he's saying that health is something that we can definitely, help. Okay, we can definitely see and we can definitely adapt these changes. And these changes can make a lot of difference in our life. But there is a collective inertia, collective lethargy, collective stoppage here as well. अब options देखते हैं. A, we are likely to spend more money on cure than prevention. Now this can be an assumption. Why? Because assumption involves what? Guesswork. A, assumption also involves the fact that अगर ये argument हमने हटा दिया, so does this passage stand anywhere? If we remove this argument, let's say we are not likely to spend more money on cure than prevention. The entire argument that the author is trying to make completely dissolves now. Because if we were spending more on prevention, if we were doing that, then why would he write इतना लंबा चौड़ा, इतना ज्यादा क्यों लिखता हो, है ना? तो उस हिसाब से A could be the answer. अब B देख लेते हैं. It is the job of government to solve our environmental and public health problems. Has this been given anywhere in the passage? Absolutely not at all. See, health can be protected even if environmental problems go unattended. Now, this could be an assumption. You could think, oh, you know what? This seems like the best answer because could be, right? But यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है, यहाँ पे ये inference ज्यादा लग रहा है as compared to an assumption because ये directly passage में दिया है ना? He is saying that health can be protected. He's not assuming this. वो evidence बड़े strongly evidence के साथ दे रहा है. So ये inference हो गया. अब B देख लेते हैं. Loss of traditional lifestyle and the influence of Western values led to some ways of unhealthy living. Okay. Again, this is not an assumption at all because we're not talking about Western values. We're not talking about traditional lifestyle. We're just talking about lifestyle. Right? So D is not your answer. With this understanding, A would be the answer to this question according to me. Alright. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Cool. What is being asked here? Crux of the passage. Crux पूछा गया है. Crux का मतलब क्या है कि आप पूरा का पूरा की आइडियाज निकाल रहे हो और उसमें से भी मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट आइडिया निकाल, राइट? So let's read the passage. Most people are not eating the right food. Some just simply a decision to stick with food they enjoy, but which is not too healthy. This is leading to an increase in non-communicable diseases. This in turn leads to a major burden on our healthcare system that have the potential to derail the economic progress, which is essential for the poor to improve their lives. For others, it is about limited access to nutritious food or a lack of affordability, leading to monotonous diets that do not provide the daily nutrients for them to develop fully. Part of the reason nutrition is under threat worldwide is that our food systems are not properly responding to nutritional needs. Somewhere along that long road from farm to fork, there are serious detours taking place. Okay, so what is this entire passage arguing about? This entire passage is talking about most people don't eat right. Who can eat right, वो भी सही नहीं खाते हैं. Those who can't afford it obviously don't eat right because they don't have access to nutritious food and they lack availability to nutritious food. He's talking about all of these things in the first two paragraphs. Now, here he says part of the reason nutritious food is under threat worldwide is that our food systems are not properly responding to nutritional needs. He's saying हमारे systems ही nutritional needs को respond नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. इसकी वजह से there is a threat, right? There is a threat that exists, and the value of farm to fork, there are certain detours taking place over there because we are not taking care of the nutrition. We're not taking care of what is actually required. We're just thinking of food. हम न्यूट्रिशन की बात ही नहीं कर रहे, हम विटामिन्स की बात ही नहीं कर रहे, हम ऐसे खाने की बात ही नहीं कर रहे जो ग्रोथ प्रमोट करते हैं, राइट? दिस इज द मेन आइडिया. ऑप्शंस देखते हैं. The scheme of universal basic income should be implemented worldwide as a way of poverty alleviation. Could this be the crux of the argument? Absolutely not, because we're not talking about universal basic income anywhere. We're not talking about poverty alleviation anywhere. So इसको आप हटाओ. भी देखते हैं. We must place food-based nutrition at the center of our policy debate. Now, this could be the option, but let's look at the other two too. Nutritional status of food should be improved by creating appropriate genetically modified crops. Have we talked about GM crops anywhere? No. Using modern food processing technologies, you must fortify food. Are we talking about fortification anywhere? No. Now again, these two could be corollaries. And these two could be the application of your knowledge that you've collected in GS. तो यहाँ पे हम क्या करते हैं रीडिंग कॉम्प्रहेंशन में? नॉलेज नहीं देख रहे हैं, हम कॉम्प्रहेंशन की एबिलिटी देख रहे हैं. तो उस सारे लॉजिक्स के हिसाब से B, ideally, according to me, should be the answer. Alright, so let's move forward to the next question. Which one of the following statements best reflect the most logical and rational? Just a second. Rational implication. अब implication बोला गया है, तो implication में क्या देखना है आपको? आपको hints देखना है. You just have to check the hints of the passage, and for that, let's just go ahead and straight up read it. To tackle the problem of pollution in cities, policymakers think that drastic actions like temporary use of odd even number scheme for vehicles, closing schools, factories, construction activities, and banning the use of certain types of vehicles are a way forward. Even then, the air is not clean. Okay, so now we know for a fact that the author has a critical tone here. The author is talking about that for battling pollution, policymakers think that drastic actions like temporary use of odd even numbers, schemes, etc., they are the ones that is supposed to be the way forward. आप ड्रास्टिक एक्शंस लोगे तभी आप पोल्यूशन को कर्व कर सकते हो ऑथर बेसिकली ये कह रहा है और ऑथर इससे डिसएग्री करता है हमें ये पता चल गया है पहला ही पैराग्राफ पढ़ के अब even then, the air is not clean. Vehicles more than 15 years old comprise 1% of the total, and taking them off-road will not make any difference. Banning certain fuels and car types arbitrarily is not proper. Diesel engines produce more PM 2.5 and less CO2 than petrol or CNG engines. On the other hand, both diesel and CNG engines produce more NOx than petrol engines. No one has measured the amount of NOx that CNGs are emitting. Arbitrary bans on vehicles that have passed mandated fitness tests and periodic pollution tests are unfair. We got this. Second. Yeah. Arbitrary bans on vehicles that have passed mandated fitness tests and periodic pollution tests are unfair. What is needed is a scientific and reliable information about the source of pollutants on continuing basis and the technologies that will work to reduce pollution from them. So the author is saying that arbitrariness of law does not necessarily always bring out the best outcomes. He's saying कि चलो हमने बैन्स तो लगा दिए पर हमें पता भी है कि जो आजकल सिस्टम्स एग्जिस्ट करते हैं जैसे CNG is also creating NOx. It is the one that is leading to more pollution. So arbitrary bans on vehicles, arbitrary bans on mandated fitness tests that actually allow these vehicles to be on the road. Despite that, we are not letting these vehicles be on the road. It's actually detrimental. So the author is saying that whenever you are making policy, whenever they are making rules, these rules should not be arbitrary. These rules should be well thought of. It should be based on, let's say, certain evidences, certain ideas, which are backed by research, right? ये बोल रहा है author. अब implication है, hints है, तो देखते हैं author ने क्या hints दिए हैं. First option, arbitrary actions, arbitrary curbs on vehicles to reduce pollution are difficult to implement. Again, this is not what the author is saying anywhere at all, right? He's not talking about arbitrary curbs on vehicles. और अगर difficult to implement होते इतना लंबा चौड़ा paragraph क्यों लिखा होगा? तो A नहीं है option. Knee-jerk reactions cannot solve the problem of pollution, but an evidence-based approach will be more effective. Now, this could be the answer because the author is hinting at this. The author is saying कि अगर आप पॉलिसी बना रहे हो तो आप ऐसी पॉलिसी बनाओ which is not just based on arbitrariness, right? It is based on well thought of policy. So B could be the answer. But C and D फिर भी हम देख लेते हैं. Heavy penalty should be enforced on those driving without periodic pollution tests. Random, एकदम absolutely relevant नहीं है, हटाओ. In the absence of laws to deal with the problems of pollution, the administration tends to make arbitrary decisions. Okay. So let's compare between B and D. Are we talking about knee-jerk reactions and the fact that evidence-based approach नहीं use हो रहा है, or are we talking about laws ही exist नहीं करते जिससे हम इसलिए हम deal नहीं कर पाते? Obviously, we're talking about this more than we're talking about D, right? Because we read this, we said that there is an arbitrariness in the action that is already being taken by the government, right? ऑलरेडी जो एग्जिस्ट करते हैं लॉज ऑलरेडी जो एग्जिस्ट करते हैं रूल्स उनकी बात हो रही है एब्सेंस की बात नहीं हो रही है तो उस हिसाब से उस लॉजिक से बी should be your answer. All right, so let's move ahead to the next question. पूछा है all right, क्या पूछा गया है लॉजिकल इन्फरेंस. तो इन्फरेंस क्या है? इन्फरेंस बेसिकली एविडेंस. एविडेंस को कैसे ढूंढेंगे हम? एविडेंस को देखेंगे यहाँ पे गेस वर्क इन्वॉल्व नहीं. ठीक है. Good corporate governance structures encourage companies to provide accountability and control. A fundamental reason why corporate governance has moved on to economic and political agenda worldwide has been the rapid growth in international capital markets. Effective corporate governance enhances access to external financing by firms, leading to a greater investment, higher growth, and employment. Investors look to place their funds where the standards of disclosure of timely and accurate financial reporting and of equal treatment to all stakeholders are met. All right. So what's being talked about here? There's a garnered interest in good corporate governance. Why? Because this actually leads to a level of increase in the kind of funds that are coming from abroad. Obviously, एफडीआई क्यों बढ़ेगी? एफडीआई तभी बढ़ेगी ना कि स्ट्रक्चर्स ऐसे हैं, सेफ फील हो रहा है आपको इन्वेस्टमेंट कहीं पे करने के लिए. ये सारे फैक्टर्स मीट करेंगे तभी इन्वेस्टमेंट आएगी. So good corporate governance is essentially a very firm aspect or a foundation of why investment will come to this country and why it's being talked about in the international political and economic agenda worldwide. Why is the government looking after this? All right, so this is what the entire aspect of the passage is about. Now let's look at the option. It is an important agenda of the country around the world to ensure access to good external financing. Okay, this could be an inference, but let's look at the other ones, right? Good corporate governance improves the credibility of the firms. Now, this is an inference for sure. Why? Because we'll see this coming in the passage. Now, this is an ambiguous question. Like I said, options confusing it. So, आराम से देखेंगे इस. International capital markets ensure that the firms maintain good corporate governance. Now, this is not your answer. Why? Because this completely misses the option of good corporate governance in the first place. है ना? इसमें एक ही part of argument आ रहा है. तो C ideally should not be the answer. D देखते हैं. Good corporate governance paves the way for robust supply chains. Now, supply chains, of course, it's a, let's say, a natural consequence. FDI आएगी तो obviously increase होगा in supply chains. पर अगर हम inference देखें, most basic evidence that's being given again and again is the fact that good corporate governance improves credibility. हर जगह दिया गया है. तो ideally, उस logic से according to me, B should be the answer and not A, nor C, nor D. Alright, आगे बढ़ते हैं. Elements are landscape architects. Before this, I'm sorry, let's check. Rational inference पूछा गया है. Again, evidence ढूंढेंगे हम यहाँ पे. Elements are landscape architects, creating clearings in the forest, preventing overgrowth of certain plant species, and allowing space for the regeneration of others, which in turn provides sustenance to other herbivorous animals. Elephants eat plants, fruits, and seeds, propagating the seeds when they defecate in other plants' spaces as they travel. Elephants' dung provides nourishment to plants and animals and acts as a breeding ground for insects. In the time of drought, they access water by digging holes, which benefits other wildlife. So here, what is being talked about? Here's the evidence clearly suggests that elephants are a really important species because they create the biodiversity in a way that they help in terms of nourishment by their dung. They are the ones who are landscape architects. They clear the area, they prevent overgrowth of certain plant species. So they are basically very important in the maintenance of an ecosystem. And this is displayed, why? This is displayed through their various functions. मतलब हाथी चल रहा होता है तो भी वो अपने इकोसिस्टम को बेसिकली कुछ अच्छा प्रोवाइड कर रहा है. तो कीपिंग दिस evidences in mind, options देखते हैं. The home range of elephants needs to be a vast area, rich biodiversity. Again, now the एक inference है पर ये सबसे logical ना सबसे rational है. तो A आपका हट गया. Elephants are the keystone species and they benefit the biodiversity. Now, यहाँ पे दिक्कत क्यों आ जाती? यहाँ पे अगर आपको keystone species क्या है वो नहीं समझ आता तो दिक्कत आ जाती. So basically, keystone species is the one which is the one that is actually the one who is maintaining the entirety of the ecosystem by their actions. So when elephants create landscape architects, they create forests, they clear forests, they act as keystone species of that ecosystem because they're maintaining that ecosystem, right? सो उस हिसाब से सबसे बड़ा एविडेंस आपका यहीं पे मिल गया, तो बी अभी तक का सबसे बेस्ट आंसर है। फिर सी और डी भी देख लेते हैं। Rich biodiversity cannot be maintained in the forest without the presence of elements. Now, this is a little vague, है ना? Cannot be maintained at all भी जरूरत नहीं है। बायोडाइवर्सिटी फंक्शन थोड़ी ना है खाली एलिमेंट्स का। बायोडाइवर्सिटी तो किसी भी चीज से आ सकती है। आप एक इकोसिस्टम की बात करोगे तब नैरो डाउन हो गया है यहाँ पे। So B would be more appropriate. But let's look at D anyway. Elements are capable of regenerating forests with species as per their requirement. Again, we're not talking about the regenerative ability of the elements. We're just talking about them being very important to an ecosystem. So B becomes your answer. Now let's move ahead. Cool. What is being asked here? Crux. Cool. In India, the segregation of municipal waste at source is rare. Recycling is mostly with the informal sector. More than 3/4 of the municipal budget goes into the collection and transportation, which leaves very little for process, resource recovery, and disposal. Where does waste to energy fit in all of this? Ideally, it fits in the chain after segregation between wet waste and the rest, collection, recycling, and before getting to the landfill. Which technology is most appropriate in converting waste to energy depends on what is in the waste, that is biodegradable versus non-biodegradable component, and its calorific value. The biodegradable component of India's municipal solid waste is a little over 50%, and biomethanation offers a major solution for processing this. All right. So what is being talked about here? We're talking about the segregation of municipal waste and how it's there, and how recycling is mostly within the informal sector. More than 3/4 of the municipal budget goes into collection and transportation, which leaves very little for process and resource recovery. ये सारे facts दे दिए author ने। फिर author ने बोला कि अब waste to energy यहाँ पे कहाँ आती है, right? Then in the last bit of the passage, author talks about it, tells you कहाँ पे ये waste to energy का जो idea है fit हो सकता है। अब options देखते हैं। Generation of energy from municipal solid waste is inexpensive. Are we talking about expenses here? No. So A technically should not be the answer. Biomethanation is the most ideal way of generating energy. Again, crux की बात हो रही है. Most essential part. Is this the most essential part? No. Segregation of municipal solid waste is the first step in ensuring the success of waste energy plants. Now, this could be the answer. But let's come to D and then come back to C. The biodegradable component of India's municipal solid waste is not adequate to provide energy from waste efficiently, effectively. Now, यहाँ पे क्या लिखा है? The biodegradable component of India's municipal solid waste is a little over 50%, and biomethanization offers a major solution for processing this. So obviously, ये गलत है. तो आपका आंसर C. I hope you were able to understand this. अब आगे बढ़ते हैं. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. Cool. There is a claim. Assumptions matlab guesswork. Let me go back to reading it. There is a claim that organic farming is inherently safer and healthier. This reality is that because the organic farming industry is still young and not well regulated in India. Farmers and consumers alike are not only confused about what products are best for them, but sometimes use products in a way that could harm them as well. For example, since organic fertilizers are difficult to obtain on a large scale in India, farmers often use farmyard manure, which may contain toxic chemicals and heavy metals. Certain place plants, such as datura flower and leaf spray, have an element called atropine. If it's not applied in the right dose, it can act as on the nervous system of the consumer. Unfortunately, just a second. Unfortunately, how much it meant to use it are not well researched or regulated issues. All right. So what is being talked about here? That organic farming generally हम क्या assume करते हैं कि safe है, healthy है. But reality ये है that this industry is still very young and not well regulated. So we don't know the possible ill effects that could come from organic farming, which the author has listed down by saying, for example, since organic fertilizers are difficult to obtain, farmers use farmyard manure, which may be toxic, which may contain metals which may harm farmers. So we don't know in necessity if organic farming is 100% safe, and we need to research to bring out regulations that will obviously protect the farmers. अब ऑप्शंस देखते हैं. assumptions की बात हुई है तो हमें पता है कि guess work इन्वॉल्व होना चाहिए यहाँ पे. Organic farming is inherently unsafe. अब inherently safe the opposite reaction should not be inherently unsafe. He's saying that there are certain things that are wrong, but that doesn't mean कि पूरा का पूरा ही unsafe है. So one option नहीं हो सकता आपका. Farmers and consumers need to be educated about eco-friendly food. Eco-friendly food की बात हुई कहीं पे? So no, ये भी हम assume नहीं कर सकते. So, D should be the answer. Now let's move forward. Same passage है, so I don't need to read this out loud. अब इसमें क्या पूछा हुआ है? इसमें ये पूछा हुआ है कि which one of the following statements best reflect the most logical, practical message? Let's read it. In India, organic farming should not be promoted as a substitute for conventional farming. Has that been mentioned anywhere? Absolutely not. No, they're not saying that you should not substitute for conventional farming. They're just saying that there are problems here that needs to be kept an eye on. आप blindly किसी भी चीज को follow मत करो. तो A आप हटा दो. दूसरे ऑप्शन देखते हैं. There are no safe organic alternatives to chemical fertilizers. Again, extreme. ये दिया गया है? नहीं दिया गया है. तो B भी हट गया. C देखते हैं. In India, farmers need to be guided and helped to make their organic farming sustainable. Could be, right? Could be. D देख लेते हैं. The aim of organic farming should not be to generate huge profits as there is still no global markets for its products. Again, ridiculous option, right? कुछ भी दे दिया है basically. तो आपका आंसर ऑब्वियसली यहाँ पे सी है. क्यों? क्योंकि डी, बी और ए एकदम इरेलीवेंट है ना? तो आपको इस हिसाब से सी should have been your answer, and it is C for me as well. Let's move forward. Cool. What are they asking? They're asking assumptions. Now this could be a question where you start feeling intimidated. Oh, look at the options. इतने सारे options हैं. पर ऐसे questions को आपको avoid नहीं करना चाहिए क्योंकि options हमेशा literally काफी absurd ही दिए जाते हैं. अभी तक का from the pattern which I've seen, right? So let's read this out loud. Food consumption patterns have changed substantially in India over the past few decades. This has resulted in the disappearance of many nutritious foods such as millets. Food consumption इतना change हो गया है. Why? Because of the green revolution. Wheat is coming in the forefront. Rice is coming in the forefront. That products like millets have completely disappeared, right? While food grain production has increased over 5 times since independence, it has not sufficiently addressed the issue of malnutrition. So what is happening is that we have definitely increased the food grain production. India is secured like that. But the next agenda, if you read the economic survey, is about nutrition security. Right? We're moving away from food security to nutrition security. And we also know that the International Year of Millets is this year. So what the author is saying that we need to sufficiently address malnutrition, and that needs to be done by addressing, of course, nutrition in general. For long, the agriculture sector focused on increasing food productions, particularly staples, which led to lower production and consumption of indigenous, traditional crops, grains, fruits, and other vegetables, impacting food and nutrition security in the process. Further, intensive monoculture agriculture practices can perpetuate the food and nutrition security problem by degrading the quality of land, water, and food. Basic idea यही है कि हमें ये बोला जा रहा है that food security से ज़्यादा हम nutrition security पे अब focus कर रहे हैं, and because we've moved away from traditional crops like millets, like fruits, and we're focusing on staples, that has compromised our nutritional security. Now let's look at the options. To implement the SDG goals and to achieve zero hunger goal, monoculture agriculture practices are inevitable, even if they do not address malnutrition. Ridiculous option. इसमें हमने लिखा गया है that malnutrition को address करना है. ये assumption होता तो पूरा का पूरा passage ही break down हो जाता, right? So 1 आपका answer नहीं है. अब 1 हट गया तो A हट गया और D भी हट गया. अब 2 और 3 से आपको देखना है, right? You just need to check if 3 is the answer, 4 is the answer, 2 is the answer. Now let's check 2 because एक ही option में है. Dependence on few crops has a negative consequence on human health and the ecosystem. Of course, this is an assumption, right? Because if we said the dependence on a few crops does not have a negative effect for human health, इतना लंबा passage कौन से काम का होता है ना? So 2 is definitely an assumption. Now we know 2 is definitely an assumption, so B should be the answer. You don't even have to look at the other options here. And this was the beauty of the elimination method, which has very brutally been removed. But yeah, over here at least you could have solved this question by elimination and got into your option. Cool. So let's move forward. Second, cool. Scientists studied, first of all, again, assumptions पूछा गया है. अब पढ़ते हैं. Scientists studied the vernal window, transition period from winter to the growing season. They found that warmer winters with less snow resulted in longer lag time between spring events and a more protracted vernal window. This change in the spring timetable has ecological, social, and economic consequences for agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. As the ice melts earlier, the birds don't return, causing a delay or lengthening in springtime ecological events. So basically, the author is saying that scientists have studied that there is a vernal window and that transition period from winter to growing season. He's saying that there is an increase in or lengthening in the springtime events because of what is happening in the winters. And the winters, what is happening is that they are warmer. Warmer why? Because of global warming. Right? तो वो कह रहा है कि there is a delay in the spring, of course, and there is a lengthening in the springtime ecological events, which is harming the agriculture, fisheries, tourism, everything. Cool. अब options देखते हैं. Global warming is causing spring to come early and for longer durations. Early थोड़ा ना बोला गया है. ये बोर्ड डिले हो रहा है, तो 1 नहीं है ऑप्शन आपको. 2 देखते हैं. Early spring and longest period of spring is not good for bird population. Again, have we talked about early spring happening at all? No, we're talking about delayed spring. Longer period of spring we're talking about definitely, but early spring to nahi aa raha hai na. So 2 is not going to be your answer. D becomes, according to me, the answer for this question. Okay, आगे बढ़ते हैं. Most logical, rational, and crucial message. Cool. A global analysis of nitrogen use efficiency, a measure of the amount of nitrogen a plant takes in to grow versus what is left behind as pollution, says that using too much fertilizers will lead to increased pollution of waterways and the air. Cool. So what is the author saying? The author is saying that, of course, nitrogen is used as an additive. And when nitrogen is used as an additive, natural nitrogen नहीं use हो रही है, chemical nitrogen use हो रही है, और because chemical nitrogen use हो रही है, बहुत ज़्यादा chemical nitrogen use हो रही है. ये दिया गया है. Now, currently the global average for nitrogen use efficiency is approximately 0.4, meaning 40% of the total nitrogen added to cropland goes into the harvested crop, while 60% is lost to the environment, says the study. More than half the world's population is nourished by food grown with fertilizers containing synthetic nitrogen, which is needed to produce high crop results. Plants take the nitrogen they need to grow, and the excess is left in the ground, water, and air. This results in significant emissions of nitrous oxide, a potent greenhouse and ozone depleting gas, and other forms of nitrogen pollution, including beautification of lakes, rivers, and contamination of river water. Cool. So, what is the author saying here? That of course we are using nitrogen because it's a requirement. Plants need nitrogen, but we are using too much of it, and the excess of it pollutes waters, it pollutes the lakes, it causes ozone depletion, it causes eutrophication of the lakes, and it is in all very detrimental. That is the most logical idea that the author is trying to put out to the reader. Now, keeping all of these ideas in mind, options देखते हैं. An enhanced efficiency of use of nitrogen is imperative for both food production and environment. Now, this could definitely be an answer because we are talking about the efficacy. of nitrogen. We're saying हम ज़्यादा use कर रहे हैं. So efficiency definitely हम बोलेंगे, right? We will say that we need to use it efficiently so that excess runoff ना हो जाए और हम pollute ना करें. Right? So this could be the answer. B, C, D देखते हैं एक बार. Production of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers cannot be stopped as it will adversely affect global food security. No, we're not talking about stopping of production first of all at all, and we're not talking about global food security even. So B हट गया. C और D देखते हैं. Alternative to crops that require excess of nitrogen should be identified and cultivated. Again, we're not talking about alternatives, we're just talking about efficiency of use of nitrogen. So C gets removed. Conventional agriculture using synthetic fertilizers should be replaced with agroforestry, agroecosystems, and organic farming. No, replacement की भी बात नहीं हो रही है. So B also gets removed. So A, by removing the other options, is your answer. Let's move ahead. All right. So what is this passage talking about? This passage is talking about the most logical, rational, and crucial message, right? So let's read this. Along with sustainable lifestyles, climate justice is regarded as a significant principle in environmental parlance. Both the principles have bearings on political and economic choices of the nation. So far in our climate change summits or compacts, both the principles have eluded consensus among nations. Justice in the judicial sense is well defined. However, in the context of climate change, it has scientific as well as socio-political connotations. The crucial question in the next few years will be how resources, technologies, and regulations are used to support the victims of climate change. Justice in climate change is not confined to actions related to mitigation, but includes the wider notion of support for adaptation of climate change and compensation for loss and damage. Cool. So, if you look at the entire passage, what is it talking about? It's talking about that sustainable lifestyle is of course important, but climate justice is regarded as a significant area of environmental parlance. Basically, जब environment के बारे में conversation होती है, climate justice को हम अकेले नहीं छोड़ सकते. And justice ideally is very easy to define, but when it comes to the context of climate change, of course it has scientific connotations, but it has socio-political connotations as well, right? It is important to hold people accountable for the actions and hold the developed countries responsible for the actions that they have done in terms of them polluting what is essentially the world today. So justice is of course related to mitigation, but it's also related to a wider notion of support. So it's not just about holding the developed nations accountable for the actions of or for the pollution that they have caused, but climate change is also about compensation for that loss and damage. So the developed nations should also think about climate justice, and that environmental parlance should also be about that. Cool. So let's look at the options. Climate justice should be ingrained in details in all the rules of all the new climate compacts and agreements. All right. So this could be the option, but let's come at B. Environmental resources are unevenly distributed and exploited across the globe. Now, can this be the most logical, rational, and crucial message? No. Let's look at option number C. There is an impending issue of dealing with a huge number of climate change victims, climate refugees. Now, this could also be an option, right? So C को भी हम एक बार circle करते हैं क्योंकि हम doubtful हैं. अब D देख लेते हैं. Climate change in all of its connotations is mostly due to developed countries and therefore their share of burden should be more. So here what's being talked about is that climate change in all of its connotations and all of its pictures is mostly because of developed countries and burden obviously should be more for them. But what is this passage talking about? The passage is talking about justice. The passage is talking about how do you involve climate justice in the environmental parlance, in the environmental dialogue, right? So उस हिसाब से, what I think, the answer could either be A or it could either be C. I genuinely believe it could be either of these options. So this could be one of those questions which has A or C correct. So we'll definitely wait for the answer key that comes in the future. But for any of you who have answered A or C, both of these options seem correct as of now to me. And according to me, this could be one of those questions जिसमें A या C दोनों में से एक आंसर हो सकता है. So leaving this here, idea is to see between A and C. That's the understanding that I have. Alright, आगे बढ़ते हैं. Sourcing food from non-agricultural land. First of all, let's check what is being asked. Message. Cool. Sourcing food from non-agricultural lands, uncultivated systems such as forests, wetlands, pastures, etc., in addition to agricultural lands, enables a systematic approach to food consumption. It allows rural and tribal communities to sustain themselves for the whole year and steer clear of natural disasters and season-induced shortfalls of agricultural food. Since the productivity of trees is often more resilient to adverse weather conditions than annual crops, forest foods often provide a safety net during periods of food shortages caused by crop failures. Forest foods also make important contribution to during seasonal crop production gaps. So, what is being said here? We're saying that food from non-agricultural lands, sourcing them from non-agricultural lands should become a priority. Why? Because it enables a systematic approach to food consumption. मतलब एक ही जगह पे ज़्यादा burden नहीं डालता है. What the author is saying that there should be a balance between the food that we get from the forest as well as the food that we get from agricultural lands. Because if we start cultivating foods that come from the forest, it may create a very important balance during seasonal gaps, during crop failures. Forest food could be of help. That's the entire idea of the passage. अब options देख लेते हैं एक बार. Food eating trees should replace other trees in rural and tribal areas. अब replacement की बात नहीं हुई है ना, तो if we know कि replacement की बात नहीं हुई है, तो A cannot be the answer. Food security cannot be ensured in India. Now, पहला ही सेंटेंस पढ़ के आपको पता है कि ये आंसर नहीं हो सकता. आपको आगे देखने की भी जरूरत नहीं है, क्योंकि this is a very extreme negative statement. We're not talking about this at all. So we point out wastelands and degraded areas in India should be converted into agroforestry systems to help the poor. Again, this could be a corollary, but let's look at option number D. Agro ecosystems should be developed in addition to or along with conventional agriculture. Yes, this seems like the answer. Why? Because we are talking about a holistic approach, and that systematic holistic approach, कौन सी option में reflect कर रहा है? खाली D में. ठीक है, फटाफट आगे बढ़ते हैं. Practical message again. While awareness on use, misuse, and abuse of antibiotics is common knowledge, as is the impact of dosing poultry with antibiotics, the environmental impact of antibiotics manufacturing companies not treating their waste has scarcely been discussed at any level or seriousness thus far. Pollution from antibiotics factories is fueling the rise of drug-resistant infections. The occurrence of drug-resistant bacteria surrounding the pharma manufacturing plants is well known. So, यहाँ पे एक expansive view दिया गया है. They're saying that AMR is not just a causative of improper dosage or improper consumption. It is also positive because when you are creating these medicines itself, वो polluted water treat नहीं किया जाता है और उसको फिर पानी में छोड़ दिया जाता है. तो उससे क्या होगा? The occurrence of drug-resistant bacteria because of this increases. So he's giving a more expansive view that we shouldn't just look at the traditional sense of why is AMR a thing, why are drug-resistant bacteria a thing. We should look at it from a very holistic perspective. So let's look at the options. Second, it is necessary to put proper effluent treatment protocols in place. Could be the option, could be, because we are talking about the entirety of what happens. Holistically, हमें ये भी देखना चाहिए कि जहाँ पे रिलीज हो रहा है वहां पे भी तो हो रहा है, राइट? ड्रग रेजिस्टेंट इन्फेक्शंस वहां पे भी तो इन्फेक्शंस नहीं. आप पोल्यूशन वहां से तो छोड़ रहे हो, तो उससे भी ड्रग रेजिस्टेंट AMR बढ़ सकता है. तो A could be the answer. B, C, D देख लेते हैं एक बार. It is necessary to promote environmental awareness among people. No, this cannot be the answer. I don't think I need to explain why. Let's look at option number C. Spread of drug-resistant bacteria cannot be done away with as it is inherent in modern medical care. Again, are we talking about it being not done away with at all, or are we talking about the fact that, okay, you know what? The problem is beyond consumption. The problem is beyond dosage. It's also about the manufacturing itself. So C cannot be the answer. Let's look at D. Pharma manufacturing companies should be set up in remote rural areas. Ridiculous, right? Absolutely ridiculous. वहां के लोगों को बीमार कर दो आप. तो D भी आंसर नहीं है. A आपका according to me most probably is the answer. अब आगे बढ़ते हैं. क्रक्स पूछा गया है. Let's read this quickly. Benefits of good quality school education accrue. Accrue matlab, accrue is basically a term which is used to signify accumulation and rapid accumulation, right? So benefits of good quality school education accrue only when students complete and leave school after having acquired the gateway skills. Like one learns to walk before running, similarly one picks up advanced skills only after picking the foundational skills. The advent of knowledge economy poses new challenges, and one of the severe consequences of having an uneducated workforce will be our inability to keep pace with the global economy. Without a strong learning foundation at the primary level, there can be no improvement in higher education or skill development. So author is saying that there are benefits of good school education and they only accrue once the school children leave. But before we teach somebody to ride a bike, right? Before we teach them how to run, we obviously have to teach them how to walk. We have to do these foundational skills. We have to set up a proper basis of education so that the new challenges that are coming with knowledge economy that is being stirred properly. I mean, just for an FYI, if you look at the whole policy of NEP altogether, NEP is worked on these foundations, right? So, इस idea से, keeping the fact that we are talking about foundational skills, let's look at the options and crux it. So, most basic argument, right? To become a global power, India needs to invest in universal quality education. Definitely could be the crux. India is unable to become a global power because it is not focusing on promoting knowledge economy. Of course not. अगर हम preparation की बात कर रहे हैं, we need to be prepared for the knowledge economy. This option is ridiculous. Our education system should focus more on imparting skills during higher education. Again, we're talking about foundational skills, right? We're talking about foundational ideas, not advanced skills. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about the quality of education. We're talking about the idea of walking before acquisition of skills, right? So C can't be the answer. B देखते हैं. Parents of many school children are illiterate and are unaware of the benefits of quality education. Irrelevant है completely. So just a second. C भी आपका आंसर नहीं है. इस लॉजिक के हिसाब से, according to me, A should be the answer. To become a global power, India needs to invest in universal quality education. So that is the answer according to me. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Most logical message implied by the above passage. This was a really interesting passage to me. The paradox of choice is illustrated by the story of Buridan's ass. John Buridan, the 14th century philosopher, I think I'm butchering his name, so forgive me, guys, wrote about free will and the inability to choose due to numerous choices and uncertainties. In the story, a donkey stands between two equally appealing stacks of potatoes. Unable to decide which to eat, it starves to death. Changes in technology and innovation such as smartphones and tablets only exacerbate our glut of choices. Constant connectivity and overconsumption of real-time data and social media can leave little room for self-reflection and thus making decisions more difficult. Life is about choices. Many people are overwhelmed with attractive life choices, yet find themselves unhappy and anxious. All right. So here, what is the entire idea? The entire idea is that whenever there are more choices, like the choices that were given to John Buridan's ass, he was not able to choose which hay he's supposed to eat and he died. Similarly, when there are more choices, especially with the advent of technology, there are more choices for everyone. It becomes more and more difficult for people to take decisions. and it becomes more and more difficult for them to be happy because they're not able to take decisions and they're anxious. Cool. अब options देखते हैं. Modern technology enfeebles societal structure and makes life difficult. Now, सबसे logical message तो नहीं हो सकता है. हमने इसकी बात नहीं की है. We're not talking about technology making life more difficult. We're just talking about choices and how choices make life difficult. Technology is not the only reason why. बस एक part है उस argument का. Modern life is full of uncertainties and endless difficult choices. Definitely could be the answer. पर आते हैं इस पे. We are influenced by the opinion of others and have no courage to follow our own convictions. कहीं भी दिया गया है ये, कहीं नहीं दिया गया है. इसलिए हटाओ. In our lives, having too few choices may not be a good thing, but having too many can be equally as difficult. Now, here, let's compare this. Modern life is full of uncertainties, but this talks about in our lives having too few choices may not be a good thing, but having too many can be equally as difficult. So, in a broader sense, this is covering most of what the author is talking about. So, agar let's say crux of the argument hoga, so I would have gone with B. But because it's messaged and message is talking about all the important points, then D, according to me, becomes the answer. I hope that's clear. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Cool. So what's being asked here regarding the financialization of household savings, which of the following statements best reflect the solutions that are implied? Hints. Implication, hints. Household finance in India is unique. We have a tendency to invest heavily in the physical assets to store and property. Steps to encourage the financialization of savings are crucial. A populace accustomed to traditional processes will not simply jump into financialization. Hurdles to change include onerous bureaucracy, a skepticism of organized financial institutions, a lack of basic information about which of the myriad services and providers is best for each family, and how, and even if, one can make the transition between them if necessary. So what's happening here? We're talking about household finance in India and how that's very unique considering unlike Western economies, our people invest in physical assets such as gold or property. So financialization of savings बहुत ही ज़्यादा important हो जाती है. And traditionally लोग prefer नहीं करते that they will jump from investing from gold to actual traditional to processes of financialization. थोड़ा skepticism रहता है financial institutions के aspect में क्योंकि उनके पास एक तो information नहीं होती है and of course क्योंकि हर family unique है there needs to be a basic different approach to each family. So that's the entirety of the passage. These are the hints that the author is trying to give कि देखो household finance इंडिया में unique है तो हमें इस चीज के बारे में एक unique perspective से ही deal करना पड़ेगा. Basically that's what the author is saying. Now let's look at the options. A flexible environment is needed to develop solutions. Definitely. Households need customized solutions. Definitely. Innovations in financial technology are required. No. Why? Because financial technology is not being talked about. We're talking about कि क्या हो सकता है household finance को deal करने के लिए. Best reflect solution सबसे for a bureaucracy. What would be the best solution? A flexible environment, customized solutions. But we're not in any way talking about financial technology. So 3 हट जाता है. उस हिसाब से A should be your answer. Again, hearing all of it. Moving forward. Assumptions पूछा गया है. Let's read the passage out loud. Pharmaceutical patents grant protection to the patentee for the duration of the patent term. The patentees enjoy the liberty to determine the prices of medicines, which is time limited to the period of monopoly, but could be unaffordable to the public. Such patent protection offered to the patentees is believed to benefit the public over the longer term through innovations and research and development, although it comes at a cost in the nature of higher prices for patent medicine. The patent regime and price protection through a legally validated high price of the medicine during the currency of the patent provide the patentee with a cost with a legitimate mechanism to get returns on the cost incurred in innovation and research. So, इस पैसेज में क्या लिखा गया है that pharmaceutical patents को एक grant मिलता है protection का and that basically lets them set the cost of the price of the medicine. And now usually what happens is this cost is basically there to bond whatever kharcha was basically done to incur innovation and research like this. So that's why although a lot of people argue कि इतना महंगा नहीं होना चाहिए during patenting time, what the author is trying to say here that of course, the idea that patent protection can be detrimental to general, distribution of this really life-saving medicines that are being created to the public because they are so costly. Again, this legally validated process protects an ecosystem which allows for more innovation and research. This is the idea of the author. एक बार हम ऑप्शन देखते हैं कि assumptions पूछा गया है तो यहाँ पे guess work involved है. Patent protection given to patentees puts a huge burden on public purchasing power in accessing patented medicines. Now, this could be the answer, but this could be an assumption, but let's come back to this, right? Dependence on other countries for pharmaceutical products is a huge burden for developing and poor countries. Are we assuming this anywhere? Are we talking about developing and poor countries anywhere? No, we're just talking about the patentee ecosystem and the patent ecosystem and how that's important too for incurring innovation for research. So 2 will not be an answer. So 1 and 2 हट गया आपका. उस हिसाब से आपका last option भी हट गया. अब रह गया 1 and 4 and 3 and 4. Now, 1 since it seemed like an assumption, we'll check 3 now because 4 has to be an option. Again, beautiful technique of elimination. But 3 एक बार देखते हैं. Providing medicines to the public at affordable prices is a key goal during many public health policy designs in many countries. Again, we're not assuming this at all, right? So 3 is not your answer. Automatically, what happens? 1 and 4, which is B, become your answer. I hope that's understandable. Let's move forward. Just a couple more left, I suppose. Yeah. छोटा सा पैराग्राफ है, फटाफट पढ़ते हैं. Assumptions है again. India should ensure the growth of the digital economy while keeping personal data of citizens secure and protected. No one will innovate in a surveillance-oriented environment or in a place where an individual's personal information is compromised. The ultimate control of data must reside with the individual who generates it. They should be able to use, restrict, or monetize it as they wish. Therefore, data protection laws should enable the right kind of innovation, one that is user-centric and privacy protective. All right. So what is the passage talking about here? The passage is saying that to ensure growth of digital economy, we need to make sure that we are not compromising the personal data of our citizens. हम ये ensure कर रहे हैं कि हमारे जो citizens का जो data है, that is not being costed or that is not being sacrificed in the terms of innovation. He's saying that कोई innovate करेगा ही नहीं एक surveillance oriented environment में और personal data को compromise नहीं करना चाहिए. And basically, it's trying to make an interlinkage between innovation as well as privacy. That's what the author is basically doing. ठीक है. अब options देख लेते हैं. Protection of privacy is not just a right, but it has value to the economy. Definitely, we can assume this. अगर हम ये बोलते हैं, let's say, protection of privacy has no value to the economy. पूरा passage resolve हो जाता है. So 1 definitely option है. There is a fundamental link between privacy and innovation. If there was no fundamental link between privacy and innovation, obviously this passage would have dissolved again. So 2 is also your answer. According to me, it should be C. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Most likely to reflect as to what the author of the passage intends to say. So whenever they say things like this, basically it means message, crucial message, or kuch nahi. In India, while the unemployment rate is a frequently used measure of poor performance of the economy, under conditions of rising school and college enrollment, it paints an inaccurate picture. The reported unemployment rate is dominated by the experience of younger Indians who face higher employment challenges and exhibit greater willingness to wait for the right jobs rather than their old peers. The unemployment challenge is greater for people with secondary or higher education, and rising education levels inflate unemployment challenges. All right. So what's being talked about here? यहाँ पे एक बहुत ही nice, unusual, different perspective दिया गया है. Perspective ये है कि unemployment rate poor performance of the economy का हमेशा measure नहीं होता. इसका measure ये भी है कि हमारी the next generation is getting educated, and they are getting educated on the fact that they don't have to necessarily compromise in their jobs. They can wait for jobs that would be more better for them according to their capabilities. So unemployment is definitely not just a challenge of poor performance of an economy. According to the author, it is a challenge of the rising education levels of the students that are coming up. So now that we've understood, let's basically look at the options. Enrollment in schools and colleges is high, but there is no quality education. No, we are not arguing this at all. हम ये कहाँ बोल रहे हैं कि quality education नहीं है. हम तो ये बोल रहे हैं कि क्योंकि इतनी quality education मिल रही है, people know their worth now, right? तो ये तो नहीं हो सकता. अब भी देखते हैं. Unemployment must be seen as a function of rising education. Yes, of course. It can be seen as a function of rising education and aspirations of young Indians. People who are not willing to settle, and that's brilliant. So B could be the answer. C and D देख लेते हैं फिर भी. There are no labor-intensive industries to accommodate the huge number of unemployed people. Again, opposite of what the entirety of the passage is saying. We're not talking about labor-intensive industries. We're not talking about any of that. So C is not the option. The education system should be properly designed so as to enable the educated people to be self-employed. Again, self-employed की बात ही नहीं हो रही है. यहाँ पे aspirations meet नहीं हो पा रहे, उसकी बात हो रही है. So D भी आपका आंसर नहीं है. B इस लॉजिक से according to me becomes your answer. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Most rational, logical, and practical message. Cool. Science by itself is not enough. There must be a force and discipline outside the scientist to coordinate them and to point to a goal. It's not possible to run a course right when the goal itself has not rightly been placed. So what is the author saying? That science अपने आप में enough नहीं है. एक force होना चाहिए, एक discipline होना चाहिए from the outside to coordinate them towards a goal. Otherwise, science becomes pointless, right? So it is not possible to run a course right when the goal itself has not been rightly placed. What science needs is philosophy, the analysis of scientific method, and the coordination of scientific purposes and results. Without this, any science must be superficial. Government suffers precisely like science for lack of philosophy. Philosophy bears to science the same relationship which statesmanship bear to politics. Movement, guided by total knowledge and perspective, as against aimless individual seeking, just as the pursuit of knowledge becomes scholasticism when divorced from actual needs of men and life, so the pursuit of politics becomes destructive bedlam when divorced from science and philosophy. So he's talking about an interlinkage between philosophy and science and between statesmanship as well as the idea of government. He's saying कि philosophy एक requirement है. अगर आपके पास goal या aim नहीं हो तो science एक बहुत ही individualistic perspective बन जाता है. Similarly for government, if the government is not led by somebody who does not understand philosophy, who does not understand what statesmanship basically means, how do you lead the public properly? Politics does become destructive. That's the entire idea of the passage. Now, इसको अपने दिमाग में रख के options को देखते हैं. Modern statements need to be well trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking to enable them to have a better perspective of their roles. Yes, could be the answer. बाकी देख लेते हैं फिर भी. It is not desirable to have government managed by empirical statements unless well mixed with others. Now, we're not talking about the desirability of a government, plus we're not also talking about this, there being two different people. We're talking about the person who is leading, who is making those approaches, who is doing that scientific study, needs to have a philosophical understanding. So B, by that virtue, gets removed. As the statements bureaucrats are the products of society, it is desirable to have a system of education in a society that focuses on training its citizens in scientific method and philosophical thinking from a very early age. Again, this is a corollary, so this cannot be the most practical message. So C is removed. It is desirable that also scientists need to be philosophers as well as to make their work goal oriented. Okay, यहाँ पे खाली scientists की बात हुई जा रही है, but आपको ये समझना चाहिए science by itself was just one part of the main argument, and the main argument was about government, right? So उस हिसाब से A should be the answer because science by itself वाला जो पार्ट था वो ऑथर सब्सटैंशिएट करके अपना गवर्नमेंट वाला पॉइंट डालना चाह रहा था, इसीलिए अकॉर्डिंग टू मी ए शुड बी द आंसर. आगे बढ़ते हैं. आई थिंक दिस इज द लास्ट क्वेश्चन. Based on the above passage, which of the following terms best express the ultimate goal of state? Cool. Let's look at the passage. The last end of the state is not to dominate men, nor to restrain them by fear. Rather, it is to free each man from fear, that he may live and act with full security and without injury to himself or his neighbor. The end of the state, I repeat, is not to make rational beings into brute beasts and machines. It is to enable their bodies and their minds to function safely. It is to lead men to live by and to exercise the free reason, that they may not waste their strength in hatred, anger, and guile, nor act unfairly towards one another. All right. So, in this entire passage, what is being talked about? They're talking about freedom. They're talking about how the end goal of state should be to not dominate the men, but to provide them with the freedom, and a limited freedom, of course, that doesn't injure other people, so that they are able to live to their full absolute potential, right? This is the basis of the entire passage. Ab options dekhte hain. Based on the above passage, best expresses the ultimate goal of state. अब ultimate goal of state, personal safety तो नहीं बोला गया है, हेल्थ बॉडी एंड माइंड भी नहीं बोला गया है, कम्युनल हार्मनी भी नहीं बोला गया है, तो अल्टीमेटली लिबर्टी ही है. अब ये तीनों क्यों नहीं बोला गया है? लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड दिस. लेट्स सी. Rather, it is to free each man from fear, that he may live and act fully. So we have free. It should be liberty. End of state, is to repeat, is not to make rational beings into brute beasts. It is to enable their bodies and their minds to function safely. It is to lead men to live by and to exercise a free reason. Again, so you can see that they're indicating liberty. Personal safety obviously is the goal, but liberty comes first. Right? If any of you must have studied political science, ये आपको ऐसे भी समझ ही आ जाता. पर anybody who has not, क्योंकि हम लोग को बेसिकली कॉम्प्रहेंड करना है, ये समझना था कि अगर फ्रीडम 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 की बात हो रही है तो पर्सनल सेफ्टी, हेल्थ, बॉडी और माइंड कम्युनल हार्मनी हो ही नहीं सकता, right? So B becomes your answer by this word. All right. So hopefully this analysis was good and fruitful for all of you. You were able to really relate to the logics that have been provided, and you were able to understand why I've come to certain conclusions about the answers as I've come to them. And this gives you clarity on, what should be your next steps, if you should start preparing for mains or not. And ideally, what we would suggest is you should definitely go for mains. You should start preparing, and we wish you all the best for the preparation itself. And again, we want to say one last time is be proud of a day that probably could not have been handled solely by the people who had set the papers itself. So congratulations for that, and we hope you liked the video. Like and subscribe. Thank you.